Welcome to Baking with Pastor Alexandra. We are going to be making pumpkin bread today. So this is a pretty easy recipe. It's one of my favorites. I do a couple little things different than the actual recipe, and I'll attach the recipe in the comments or in the captions that you have the recipe. So first, to start us out, I just want to talk a little bit about making bread as a spiritual practice. So a lot of people will consider bread making a spiritual practice. And I'm going to go ahead and start us off to start thinking about why bread might be something that we might feel close to God when we do. And I'm going to start us out by reading us a scripture. I'm going to read us Psalm 139, 13 through 18. Listen now for the word of the Lord. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! I tried to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So the reason that I chose this scripture is because when I think about baking bread, I think about all of the parts that go into making bread. It's very intricate. Some breads, this bread doesn't, but some breads even involve knitting and kneading, kind of like it talks about in this scripture. In the scripture, it talks about God knitting us together in our mother's wombs. So much like God knit us together and spent time and put effort into making each one of us, we put time into making bread. And so as you think about the intricacy that goes into the bread, the different ingredients and how each of them come together to make the whole, you can think about the way that God created you. And each bread comes out a little bit different. You can have the same recipe and you can have 3 different people make it and it'll all come out just a little bit different. And I think that's the same for all of us. We're all made in the image of God, but we're all made a little bit differently. We're all made with our own special traits and our own special gifts. So as you go through this recipe with your family, I encourage you to think, and I encourage you to think about what special things make you who you are. What is it that makes you the person that you are? What are some special gifts or traits? And I want y'all to think about that and talk about that with one another. And as you put the ingredients for the bread together, think about the special ways that God made you who you are, and the way that God took time into making you. Think about that as you make the bread, and talk about that as a family. What does it mean to be created by God, to be created good by God, to be created in the image of God? What does that mean? So y'all think about that as you make the bread, and I'll ponder it too, and maybe in a couple weeks we can kind of talk about what we thought about that and how what our opinions were and what we talked about. So I'm going to start us out on our recipe now, and it's a pretty easy recipe. I love recipes that are easy. So it only involves 6 ingredients. 6. That's not bad at all. So this is a healthy flourless pumpkin bread. So not only is it yummy, but it's healthy, so you can feel good about eating it. So to start us out, the first ingredient, well, first we're going to preheat our oven. We can't forget that step. So I'm going to preheat my oven to 350 degrees. And like I said, I'll link this recipe so that you have it. It's from Pinterest. And you're going to want to also grease your pan too. So here's our pan. And also, just to throw this in there too, we're making pumpkin bread because pumpkin spice is my favorite season. So we're going to preheat the oven here to 350. So that way, as soon as you get done, your bread will be ready to pop on in the oven. And then you're going to want to go ahead and grease your pan too. I can't tell you how many times I have forgotten to grease my pan when I have been cooking. And then I realize that I didn't grease it when it's sticking to my pan. So not something that you want to do. So we're going to set our grease pan aside. And then we're going to basically just add all of our ingredients in. And so I will say, the recipe says to use a blender. I've made this recipe like 3 or 4 times, and I never use a blender. I imagine that if you use a blender, it would probably just be a little more smooth and a little more fine, because one of the ingredients is oats. And so I imagine that it would probably just make it more fine, like, and less big chunks. But I actually like mine with the bigger chunks of oats, because I think it makes a really good breakfast bread that way. So y'all make it however you want to. That's just the way that I make it. So we're going to go ahead and start here. And typically you would want to start with your wet ingredients first. So we'll start with that. Dry ingredients first. Dry ingredients. My bad. We're going to start with our dry ingredients first. My husband's in the background and he made a big face at me when I said wet ingredients first. So I'm glad he caught me on that one. So I just put our oats. That was 2 cups of oats. So 2 cups of uncooked oats. You don't want them cooked. And then we're going to do a full teaspoon. This is a full teaspoon. We're going to do a full teaspoon of baking soda. And that's what's going to make our bread really rise here. So 1 good teaspoon of baking soda. And then this recipe calls for either cinnamon, or you can do pumpkin pie spice too. So you're going to do 1 teaspoon of that also. And I love cinnamon. I'm a big cinnamon person. So, I usually do a pretty big heaping teaspoon. And I'll even put a little bit extra in there too, because I like mine with extra cinnamon. So I usually do that and just drizzle a little more in there. I don't think you can ever have too much cinnamon really. So. All right, so that was our dry ingredients, which is what you start with, not your wet ingredients, y'all. All right. So now we got all our dry ingredients in there. Now we can start with our wet ingredients. So that includes a 1/2 cup of maple syrup. And I could be a spokesperson for Target because I have all this Target stuff. This is my maple syrup that I like to use. It's a pretty good price, and it comes in a really big bottle, and it's delicious. So we're going to use a 1/2 cup of maple syrup here. Sticky. Really get it out. Set this aside. And then let's see. We got our pumpkin here. Again, another Target product. We got some organic pumpkin going. I'm going to make this extra healthy. And FYI for you dog owners out there, pumpkin is always a good thing to have in your cabinet. Not only can you make delicious breads with it, but if your doggy ever has a little bit of an upset tummy, a pumpkin is a really good thing to give them. So pumpkin is a good staple to have in your pantry. And you're going to use the whole can of pumpkin. You want to make sure you get just regular old pumpkin, not like pumpkin pie filling or anything like that, just regular stuff. And FYI, if you go to the grocery store right now, I guess a lot of other people are making pumpkin bread because I had a really hard time finding it. They still had some at the Target on Schillinger Road, but it was all the Target brand. They didn't have any of the Libby's, so just so y'all know. Maybe by the time you go get it, they'll have more. I don't know. So, that's that. Just going to stick this in here so we don't get the counter dirty. And then we got our eggs. And this calls for 2 eggs, 2 large eggs. So we got our 2 large eggs here. And it doesn't matter what kind of egg you got. I just have brown eggs. Which, I'm going to tell y'all, I really think that brown eggs taste different than white eggs. I don't know what it is, but I've had a lot of brown eggs lately, and I really think that they taste different. I don't know why. I kind of like them a little bit better. our eggs. And that's really all the ingredients. See, it's really pretty easy. I'm going to grab a paper towel. That's really all it is. That's all of our 6 ingredients. So it's real easy. So then all you really do now is this would be the point that if you're wanting your bread to be more fine, you would actually get your blender out, I suppose. But, this is just as good if you just do it, not blending it, just mix it up really well. And you're going to want to mix it until it really kind of starts to look like a batter. Do you hear that? Our oven's ready, so it'll be ready for us to pop the bread in right when we're done. And I suppose, I'm using a spoon, but I suppose you could also use like your mixer too if you want to. And I set our grease pan aside right over here. So we got our grease pan now. And now you're just going to so this is what mine looks like, just so y'all can see it. It looks pretty oaty, but I like mine like that because like I said earlier, I kind of like it as like a breakfast bread. It makes a really good breakfast bread. So then you literally just put it in your little loaf pan, and I got a 9x5 loaf pan right here. Okay. So then you got it in your pan, and you just really want to smooth it out. And it'll look pretty empty in your pan at first when you put it in there, but it'll rise with that baking soda when you put it in the oven to bake. So our bread is just about ready to go in the oven here. Just smoothing it down on the top. Okay. We got our bread. It's ready to go in the oven. All right, and we're going to put it in the oven for 30 minutes, okay? Okay, so during that 30 minutes, I encourage y'all to like talk as a family and think about those questions that I posed and think about all the different steps that went into making this bread and all the different flavors that you're going to have in it and what makes this bread special. Think about that and think about what makes you special. What did God give you that makes you special? Okay, I'm going to pop this in the oven now. Our pumpkin bread is ready. Let's get it out of the oven. It smells so good. Here it is. That was a close call. Here it is. Yum. Okay, so what you're going to do here is, I don't have a toothpick. If you have a toothpick, you'd want to use that. But I'm going to use a fork. And so if you're going to stick it in, and as long as it comes out pretty clean, then it's done. And it's got, this particular bread is a little mushy anyway, so it's going to need to sit for a little bit. So it might not come out completely clean to start off with. But that's it. That's all you do. So good luck in your pumpkin bread making. I hope it goes swimmingly. And I hope you enjoy all of your pumpkin recipes for this fall. I have lots more, so stay tuned. That's all for now, folks.